Wait, what point did you discover that you wanted to, because you went from that to where you're now running a very large team on Enchanted Rock's operations side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have a very specific profile for things that you're trying to hire towards, right? And I say these things because now I want to
Sure.
make sure the industry understands not what you do and how you got there, but like what you are looking for and why those are the things. There's specific traits you look for. We've had the opportunity to help you guys in the past. So,
right. And thank you for that.
Well, look, man, thank you.
You're going to help us some more. I need some help.
We love to help. But I think I want to hear about that transition from maybe you were at sea for too long or whatever. Like some point you're like, I wonder what else is out there. I mean, what was it that led you to go from, are you still sail at all? I mean, do you still have your active Coast Guard?
My license is expired.
Okay.
And my wife will tell you that she likes it expired.
Yeah.
I can go renew it, but I still sail as a third.
Would you want to go back to sea?
No. There's a part of me that, personal, yeah. I'd love to go buy a 50-foot sailboat and that's what I want to retire on, selling my stuff.
For real?
Hey, Karen, let's go live on a sailboat and go park it in Barcelona. Absolutely.
Damn. And is she down on that?
Maybe. We'll find out. I might be selling a 50-foot sailboat 2 years old.
Well, you went from, how did you get to Georgia?
So I had a period in my career where I stopped going out to sea. And when you go out to sea for on the merchant side or the commercial side, you might get 90 days on, 90 days off, or 6 months on, 6 months off. You get a certain hitch with a certain company, and you have a certain schedule with that. And I couldn't deal with the vacation. That sounds weird. Like, hey, you just went to work 3 months straight, no days off. Now you get 3 months off. Like it was 2 weeks into.
It was a waste of time.
It was like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Like I just can't sit on the couch. And don't get me wrong, you make really good money when you go out to sea. You're making $300-400 a day, depending on what billet you have. And now you get all this money, you don't spend it when you're underway. Yeah. You're like, what do I do now? And and meanwhile, all your classmates, you're going to ring up a buddy and say, hey, you want to go play? He's out at sea. And you call up another buddy. He's out at sea. He's not going to be back. And you're like, well,
yeah.
Is it too early for a beer? And you went, yeah, I don't want to do that. And I was dating my wife, Karen. I said, I want to have kids and stuff. So in that second or third vacation of 2, 3, 4 months, you're like, I started working part-time at a mechanical contractor. I had to do something to keep myself busy. And then, but the call, the ocean, the sea and the pay was like, man, maybe I'm going to go back and get another ship. And then I parlayed some of that into a couple different, working for Emerson was one of them. And it was comparable pay. Didn't have to go out to sea, and it was a P&L responsibility as an area manager. Got a Mass Maritime grad, said, hey, he saw my resume and gave me a good reference to Emerson. He worked for one of the local business partners that sold for Emerson. And they had some struggles with the area manager there before. So he wanted somebody with, ring knocker, so to speak, some common DNA. And he was 15 years older than me. He's like, hey, let's give this guy a shot. And I was like 25, 26. Put me in over a machine shop in a valve repair center in Worcester, Massachusetts, about a $3 million P&L. And the 7-8 technicians, they some former Navy, and they had kids my age. And there I was, ultimate responsibility for basically a big section of the Northeast, all the power plants, all the nuke plants up there doing service work, and just had a blast. And Emerson did it, and I was getting my MBA at the time, and it was like getting a second MBA. I mean, because they drove everything down to the bottom line, P&L for every one of their locations. They published it monthly, really good financial reporting. And it really clicked with me. I really enjoyed that, building some people and surprising them with my knowledge, and seeing how they respond. I spent a lot of time in the field. I was very truly lead by walking around. I was new. How am I going to get this team of folks that I got kids my age, might be intimidating? I was out in the machine shop looking at whatever they were machining, had done some machining in college. I mean, you go underway, you don't have a part, you're going to make your part, right? You're going to get home. But at that time, somebody 25 years old that knew how to machine, or at least knew enough about machining, that was rare even then. Machinists are a dying breed because there's everything CNC, and So to see a couple of blonde lathes and these big engine lathes out there, and to be able to pick something up and say, "Did you
I can make this.
Did you plunge too much? Why are you going to clean up this surface finish? Run your your calibrated thumbnail over and be like, man, that seems kind of rough." He knows the hell he's talking about.
Yeah.
So get some credibility there. But I spent a lot of time in some of the power plants we were doing work at when our guys would be out there, or our team was out there, and I was whatever I could do to make their life easier. Because I mean, you go into these massive combined cycle plants that go into an outage, and they bring in 300, 400, 500 contractors. The whistle blows to go grab lunch. Like everybody's leaving to go stand in line at the food truck. And then you get a half an hour, 45 minutes for lunch. You spend 15 minutes trying to go find something to get somewhere, 15 minutes back, and maybe you could stuff a sandwich in your mouth. So I'd show up on site with bags of Panera bread, sandwiches, pizzas, whatever. You guys
got a lot more output.
Got a lot more output. They were happy. I was in the trenches with them. And then if they needed something from the storeroom and they're at the, at the top of the steam drum, they're at the steam drum level, and I'm like, let me go. You keep working. Let me go get that.
Smart.
Boom. Just keep them working. And built a lot of credibility that way, so that when you had to have the tough conversation of like, oh, why'd you show up 30 minutes late today? We were all waiting on you, myself included. They're like, oh, I'm sorry. And they never did it again because they knew you were there. It was a lot. It cut my teeth doing a lot of that. And I learned the business really, really well from that.
And that opportunity was provided by one of your fellow ring knockers?
Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
He got me the interview.
Yeah,
I'd like to think I did the rest. But he gave me the opportunity to take a shot at it.
I love that. And then
I spent 8 years there.
8 years in Worcester?
8 years in Worcester, Mass. Well, I didn't want to live in Worcester,
Gotcha.
Mass. Sorry, Worcester folks. But no, the location was in Shrewsbury, Worcester line right there. And we had just bought our first house. Both Karen and I were working to pay our mortgage. It was just like 2008 timeframe. And it was like every penny we had down payment, bought a house.
Yeah.
I don't think we sold that and left, but I don't know if I could afford that house now. I mean, just the inflation in around there, but
especially up there.
Tiny little house. But Emerson really got me into the whole leadership thing. And then within about 3 years of running that P&L, I had really developed all the commercial nuclear service work at Dominion Millstone up there in the Northeast, the one in the Seabrook, New Hampshire power plant, nuclear plant. And
there's people I served with them right there.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, like the internal management at Emerson, like we don't do a whole lot of service work at these nuclear plants. What's going on in the Northeast? And I said yes to, hey, do you want to try? You want to bid on this work? I'm like, yes. Do you want to bid on this work? I'm like, yes. I said yes. Well, then I said to everything, right? I was hungry. I wanted to grow the business, and really just found a niche in the nuclear business. And they said, hey. One, you're an engineer, and two, you actually know how to talk to people, which is
not usual.
Not usual. And they said, hey, do you want to get into business development? Because we would love you to do that for the rest of North America.
Because you understand the technology well enough, then you can understand how to communicate it. Someone has to message that well. Engineers tend to be really good at one thing and not great at the other, right?
Right. And
or vice versa.
Right. And it was interesting. On the commercial side, you would think that you're refueling a commercial nuclear reactor. You got to do a lot of instrumentation work. But when they bring in so many contractors, a lot of the category managers, and the only thing that they have to judge you on is your labor rate. And can you give me the bodies I need? Yeah. And so I was working for the OEM, and Emerson Fisher did a very good job in Rosemont. And Rosemont Nuclear did a lot of good work in the 60s and 70s, where almost every single instrument in the nuclear island was Rosemont Nuclear.
Really?
Yeah. And it was easy for them to get nuclear indemnification and be able to buy and sell into the nuclear plants, and it covered all Emerson entities. So. But a lot of their main steam valves and pressurizer spray valves, if it was a PWR, they were all Emerson valves as well, and vintage Emerson valves. And at least the model back then was, well, I'm going to be the guy that does the in-body work in the valve. I need a different guy to do the actuator. I need a different guy to do the packing. Well, if you use the OEM, yeah, we're $135, $150 an hour. You don't need to get three guys at $80 an hour. You can use the one guy. He can do it all. And honestly, they weren't kind of biting at it until you really kind of peel back the onion. And one of the things that most of the commercial nuclear plants really focus on is dose rate and how much dose rate their workers get. So once you understood their business a little bit more, you're like, you tell them the same thing, like, well, instead of 3, you're going to get 1. And then when you do the aggregate number, they're like, yeah, but their labor rate's so good. It's like, I'm looking at the total cost. And they go, yeah. Then all of a sudden you go, I'm going to reduce your dose rate.
Okay, so that matters. Now it's the number one KPI, safety.
Yeah,
right?
so now it's one of their big KPIs, and you go, I'm going to reduce your overall dose rate by having less people. So
like, I'm listening.
Instead of getting a 0.5 millirem across 3 people, each person getting a 0.5 millirem, you're going to get 1 person with 0.5 millirem because you don't have to have the other 2.
And you'll save a shit ton of money, it sounds like, along the way.
You'll save some money. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Can I sign a long-term fleet agreement?
There you go.
So all of a sudden, I had a lot of success with that and just telling a story, but it was also the promise keeper. And can you give me 10 of those guys that you just, 10 workers in this time frame? And having been an area manager and run one of those shops and had some friends in the rest of the Emerson network, they had 50 something shops across North America. I banked a lot of favors because when any of those other shops called and said, hey, I need somebody down in Louisiana who's doing a pulp and paper outage, or Plant Farley needs some people or whatever, I'd go out in the shop and say, who wants to travel and make some money? And I get a couple of hands. I'm like, it's 3 weeks, it's 80-hour weeks down in Louisiana. You're going to come back stinking like a pulp and paper plant, but you sure you want to go? And they're like, yep. And I'd farm my people out because I would reduce the overhead at my shop.
Made sense.
So instead of carrying people that I didn't have the work for,
you
it's very
the
seasonal
from SG&A. Yeah,
absolutely,
it's really smart.
And they get to make some money. They broaden their horizons. I caught a little grief because the way the regions were set up, like, you take care of your area and then you take care of your region. You're like, screw those guys in Texas, screw those guys in California. You got to take care of the East Coast. And it's like, I'm going to send them where they need to go.
And did that fall into conflict? Is that why?
No, but it was kind of concentric circles, like closer the better. And I did take care of the region first. But when you had an opportunity to expand your guys a little bit and train them and send them to Louisiana and the Gulf Coast in the winter and it's warm and you get a little bit of goodwill, and I try to farm them out, but in the Northeast in certain times of year, it's the same seasonal work from Maine to South Carolina. So it's very seasonal. And when the outages are, they stack up. So it's feast or famine. But that wasn't the case in other geographic areas. So they might be offset by a month or 2 in their feast and your famine. I was sending
overlapping offsets. It's a good place to capitalize, right? So how did you?
And they made a bunch of money. The techs made money. That's all I cared about.
That's fantastic, though. But you did that with Emerson for how long?
8 years with Emerson. 6 years doing the business development across North America, and 2.5 years doing the ops manager to start. And then at the end of that tail end. They had so Emerson, you couldn't call Emerson direct and say, hey, I want to buy some stuff. They'd say, where are you calling from, Kirk? And you say, oh, I'm calling from Texas. You need to talk to Puffer Swive. And Texas. And then, so it was protected territories, and it was I wouldn't call it a good old, but those very well established 65, 70 plus years, most of these business partners of Emerson have been in place, a distributor.
They're manufacturers reps. Is that what they are?
Manufacturers reps.
Right.
I wouldn't call them a distributor. They do all the engineering and customer service piece. Emerson just owns the engineering and design and supply chain on the back end. But what do you need, and let me size and let me select and size what asset you need for your unique problem, and that's what they would do. Gotcha. And then put the order in the factory or build it themselves if they had the inventory on behalf of Emerson. And it just got me on that track of like, hey, and when you're doing business development, and one of the biggest LBPs for nuclear was Southern Company, and in that, Georgia, Southeast Florida and everything else there with Exelon and a couple others. And they were looking to go build the service work that Emerson didn't do. So Emerson wanted to work on Emerson stuff. They were the OEM, they want to work on their stuff. So when I started with Emerson, the big mantra was like, break the bundle, get our stuff. High margin, best value add, break the bundle. We don't want to do the 300 valves in the plant. We just want to do the 30 that are ours. Okay. Best value to the customer, best value for us. But when you want to grow like a big publicly traded company like Emerson, you have those financial commitments. Like every year I want 6-8% growth, 6-8% growth, 6-8% growth. At a certain point you go,
it's untenable. Yeah.
Break the bundle got us to a certain trajectory, and that's great. And what are we going to do different? Well, now we want the whole bundle. but I don't want to develop scope of services for stuff we don't have the product on. So they told their distributor they told all their LBPs or local business partners, we really want to kind of get into this space. Wink, wink, nod, nod. You're going to do it. So we don't have to do it. And then Control Southern, where I spent my after Emerson life, they brought me down there to go build a business from scratch. So
down to Georgia?
Yeah. So in 2013, I moved from Boston to Central Georgia.
What year was this?
2013.
When was the Boston Marathon?
2013.
That's right. So, wow, were you there before or after that happened?
I was there when it happened.
Okay.
So my in-laws live in Newton, which is like mile 19 of the marathon. And every Monday, Marathon Monday, when we live in there. It's
a zoo probably.
It's a zoo, and we always had a cookout. We always had a big Marathon Monday. It's like evacuation day. The Red Sox have a game at 10 a.m. It's a big party. It's a big, huge party in Boston. And so they were about a third of a mile from mile 19, right? Heartbreak Hill and all that stuff. And so like every year, I mean, this was like year 5 or 6 for me, going to the marathon. We were at mile 19. We heard, what sounded like firecrackers at the time. That was the finish line.
That was like mile 26, right?
Right. That was mile 26, just, further down the road from where we were. But we had a flight the very next morning to go to Georgia.
You were moving that the next day?
Well, we were going to look at houses and have dinner with the owner of the company, and I was bringing my kids with me, and we are going to go look at some areas and get them acclimated to the move. But we were the first flight that Tuesday morning to Atlanta, and we had people that ran the marathon on the plane with us. We get to Atlanta, and we just get off the plane, and there's like news
everywhere,
news crews and cameras like stuck in your face, like trying to interview, and there were people wearing like finishers jackets and stuff on the plane, and it was pretty intense. Just
very open source,
very open source, trying to see what was going on. And then so we spent the rest of the week there, and then on Friday we actually were coming back, and Friday was when
they caught them.
Or they would Friday morning early is when it sounded like hand grenades, homemade IEDs going off in that neighborhood in Watertown. And
that's it.
So we actually didn't have a direct flight on the way home. We were going Atlanta to Philly, Philly to Boston. And we get to Philly and our second half of our flight is canceled.
Because
possibly they wouldn't tell us, but they said, we can reroute you on Sunday. I'm like, I'm not hanging out in Philly till Sunday. It's Friday midday. So
rent a car.
And the boys, we're going to rent a car. It's a 5-hour drive, 4.5 or 5 hour drive. Let's go.
Or the train,
the train. So we rented a car, and so we hustled. We just want to get back, and we knew what was going on, and so we're on 95 North. We're right past the GW Bridge on 95 in New York, just outside of New York City, and like 6 or 7 like blacked out SUVs with DC tags on them go past us like we're standing still, and we're fast drivers, right? Like we were standing still, straight shot down 95. And by the time we got to Boston, they were still looking for the one brother. And now it's like rush hour traffic. There's no rush hour. Like I've never seen a city go martial law, complicit with there was nobody on the streets other than state troopers, firemen, local PD, whatever. That was it. It was not a single person to be found.
Good though. That would fire. The way
they would have found him otherwise, right? I mean, but it was kind of spooky because we still had a car at the airport. And we were about 30 minutes from the airport, no traffic. So, but at rush hour, it's normally like an hour and a half each way from where we live to the airport. So we dropped the kids back off at the house with the neighbor, and at like 4:30, 4:45, we made it all the way downtown to the airport. And the airport in Boston's right in the city, and got our rental car, dropped off, picked up our car, and made it all the way back in like 45 minutes. Both ways.
Record.
Like a record. I mean, it was pretty scary then around that time.
I think we were all glued to the TV watching that. Everybody I knew that was living in Boston at the time, I was calling and being like, "Where's Watertown?"
Right.
Right. But it was. I mean, that movie was a Patriots Day. Is that the movie that came out with Wahlberg? Great movie. I mean, I don't know if there was a bunch of composite characters that were built or something.
No,
like that.
I think it was pretty
really
pretty close to reality.
Crazy story. So, but you end up. I mean, I could see how the attack in Boston could evoke the emotion in which you're like, that's my town, I'm staying here, or some shit. But you decided that it was the best move to move to Georgia.
It was the best opportunity for the family.
I got you.
We were
and that was Atlanta, basically?
We were in Kathleen, Georgia, which was 30 miles south of Macon.
Macon, okay. I know where Macon's at.
So if I'm Georgia, this is Macon.
So I've
no offense, Maconians.
I built data centers in Alpharetta and Sewanee and through Atlanta, but the
headquarters was in Sewanee. The company I went down there for. So they were up in Sewanee, Johns Creek area, and there was I call it the deployment. I did a deployment in Central Georgia, surrounded by cotton fields.
But what was it? It was a power plant you were building?
No, I built a shop.
Okay.
So getting back to it. So Emerson did a lot of the OEM service themselves, and then they really, again, to get that same repeatable 6-8% growth over every year in, year out. They really were putting this effort, and they were trying to align the products into that space as well.
So hold on. So they were trying to reduce scope while increase profitability while doing that. So they would have to find some sort of volume.
Right. So originally they would reduce the scope to best value for us and what we have our expertise on, and that OEM message. Like, we're not the OEM for that stuff. We don't care who you have service that. But they wanted to own, then they go, hey, we want to own the whole life cycle. And for us to own the whole life cycle, we got to have all the rest of the valves.
Yeah.
So if we can do the service work on the rest of the valves at their end of life, we'll replace them with our stuff.
Yeah, smart.
Smart, right? But the missionary work to go get that business fell on the local business partners like Control Southern. And they said, hey, we're going to go start this business. And so they had known me for a while. They had known me doing business development and been an ops guy. And they said, hey, would you be interested? I was at like a nuclear trade show actually, and this guy Larry Fordham, who's their VP of sales, he goes, "Hey Pete, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I work, I'm still up here in the Northeast." And he goes, "Do you like Georgia?" I'm like,
it's basically the dyslexic version of Boston.
Yeah,
right? They use their R's down in Georgia. You know what I'm saying? I don't think there's a lot of Dunkin' Donuts down there either. So was it a hard acclimation?
It was a little bit of an acclimation because I wasn't in, like I said, I wasn't in Atlanta. I wasn't in Savannah. I would have loved to have been in Savannah. I was in
Georgia.
Like, drop a pin in the geographic dead center of the state, and that's where I was. And
your kids okay? They dug it. They acclimated.
You know what? They did.
Well, one's at UT. Obviously, still pretty good.
Yeah. So I mean, with the kids, it was. In my opinion, it was great for them to move. They've moved a couple times.
Did it make your sons have a stronger bond knowing that when they would move that was their best friend, the brothers?
Yeah.
It made my brothers and I grow closer.
Yes. I mean, it was just the two of them.
It's a guaranteed best friend wherever you go.
Yeah. And they're still close with each other, even with my son Peter at UT, and they still.
4 years is shit.
I don't know how often my older son plays Fortnite or anything, but it was just like the other night they were like, "Oh, I'm playing Fortnite with Peter."
That's cool.
And they had the headsets on and doing all that stuff. And I don't know which one. There was a lot of hooting and hollering coming from my son David's room. But yeah, they still do that. And,
good.
And before I came here and met up with you today, I had a late breakfast with him too. So
what's he studying at UT?
Electrical and computer engineering. He's an ECE major. He got into ECE honors. It's like the number 1 and number 2 toughest major. I mean, he got into UT no problem, but to get his major my wife has done a very good job raising the boys. They are both overachievers, both. My son Peter, and from first grade, even in, I had this concern of, Boston school system's usually pretty good on the national level, and then going to Central Georgia, and then moving from Central Georgia to Houston and being in the KDISD school system, which is top 20 in the state of Texas, somewhere around there. Like, man, how is it going to translate from, we had this.
KD's super competitive.
Yeah, and it's super competitive. And it's like, is there going to be this drop off from Boston to Georgia, and then Georgia, like, oh my, gifted and talented stuff. 1490 on his SATs, 36, I think, on his ACT, took it once.
It's crazy. And you wanted to go to UT?
No, he wanted to go there.
I was like, man, there's some.
He tried. He had a lengthy list of he's like, Dad, I think I want to go to an Ivy League school. First, it was Tufts University up in the Northeast in Massachusetts, and then
kind of cool. You got family up there still?
We still got some family up there, and I mean, he loves going back there. We go back there twice a year, and but it was like Tufts. It was Harvard. He didn't want to apply to MIT for some reason. He was like, I don't think it'd be a good fit for me. And I'm like, hey, be yourself. Stanford, Cornell, a bunch of really good schools in like UT, Georgia Tech. And he really wanted to go to UT.
Good for him.
Electrical and computer engineering. He interned with Enchanted Rock for 2 summers. And he really enjoyed it. Went through some ERS events and saw firsthand what
So what got you to Enchanted though? You were in Georgia. How long were you there for?
I was 6 years in Georgia, and I got to a crossroads of at some point I got to get out of Middle Georgia. It's just not. I mean, I called it my deployment. I'm like, I either got to go to Atlanta, bring the family to Atlanta, or go somewhere else. And we had just acquired a shop a year or two prior in Florida, in the Jacksonville area. So I was driving, it was about a 4-hour drive from Jacksonville back to the Macon area. And there I was driving on 75, and out of nowhere, I get a call from a headhunter, and I got 3 more hours on the highway. And at that point, I'm like, man, I want to go to Atlanta. It wasn't, the company was like, you can move yourself to Atlanta. We'll give you.
So were you on the market, or were you hoping to find a?
I was passive at that point. I got to the point where, I'd hired 45, 50 people. I grew the business to $50 million. So I had built this business, a couple small acquisitions. The owner just got out of my way and said, dude, like no oversight, just maybe check in sometimes because I was spending his money. But bought it like a 40,000 square foot shop, did all the refurb on it, a couple small acquisitions of other competitors of small machine shops, one in Savannah and then one in Jacksonville to broaden the scope. And I really wanted to get out of Middle Georgia and back. And it just, at that time, just had built a bunch of really solid people and a team, had set up a couple of product lines, and I really wanted to take that next step. And they're like, my timeline didn't work with their timeline. And then all of a sudden, I was going to stick it out, but all of a sudden the phone rings, and normally I'd be like, I'm happy with what I'm doing. I'm like, I got a couple more hours on the highway. So I take the phone call, and the guy goes, hey, I got a VP of engineering job. I'm like, okay. I'm like, where's it located? And he goes, Sedalia, Missouri, or Houston, Texas. And I'm like, is Houston an option? And he goes, absolutely. I said, all right, tell me more. And then I took a job, got the job, moved the family to Houston in the December 2018 timeframe. Okay.
So, and your kids...
I had started there 4 or 5 months earlier, and then it was one of those like flat, commute Monday to Friday for like the first 6 months until I could
found the place.
Move, yeah.
Yep, I got you. And what was that like? I mean, had you known who Enchanted Rock was at that time?
No, I didn't know anything.
Seems like a pretty solid fit for what you were doing.
So I was at Pro Energy, and I was having fun there, and then I just got to a point where I'm going to start passively looking. I don't know if this is the right fit for me, but I was already in Houston. And
in 2018, how old was Enchanted Rock at that time?
I think 7 or 8 years. They've
been around longer.
Been around.
Oh, I didn't realize they were that. Okay.
But when I started passively looking, I was like, man, I think I want to do something different. And then it was right around the Christmas time frame, and I was in Boston for the holidays. And this was December of 2019. And I was like, man, I see VP of operations for Enchanted Rock, microgrid technology, microgrids. And I'm like, let me do some research on them, and a bunch of stuff like Thomas talking, some articles. And when I looked at their business model of resiliency as a service, and it's mostly recips, and I'm a recip guy, diesel guy, engine guy. And I'm like, they got a fleet of engines. Like, wait a second, and they want to scale and they want to build their business. And man, I have some experience doing that too. And that's one of my core competencies. I know the inside of an engine and where to hit it for the most part with a hammer to make it work. Like this might be good. So, but the funny thing was, Enchanted Rock's big on former Navy nuke.
Were they before you got there? Because
they were. I mean, Thomas is former Navy nuke, and again that whole thought process and the skill set that the Navy provides, those especially in the Navy nuke side. I mean, they really hone their skill, and
they prove and demonstrate a lot to be validated, right? So they're
up on a pedestal. I mean, a lot of people wash out from that program. I mean, it's not easy. They cherry pick the people they put through it. And that's kind of some of our core DNA with Thomas and a lot of others that have helped write the first chapters in the
Plus,
Enchanted
you guys
Rock
have
journey.
Greg there now too, right? He's
Yeah, we got Greg Edwards there, 28-year Navy veteran, and a Mustang too.
I don't know if I knew that. So
He's a Mustang.
I think he told me that. Was he like, he was an instructor at Power School when he got picked up for a commission program or something?
He might have been, but I think he started as
Machinist mate or something?
electrician's mate on a sub.
Oh, okay.
I think 4 or 5 years electrician's mate on a sub, and then he got a 4-year degree from Texas A&M electrical engineering,
Just like Thomas.
Then he got his buttermilk bars. So yeah,
it's
and then sailed another 20 years after that, or 25 years after that.
I think he was a sub commander too, wasn't he? Yeah. So I mean, he checks all the boxes, obviously. And I got the chance to meet him at DCAC a few years ago, right? And
like a master's degree. Not that if anybody listening, like I don't memorize all my people's resumes, but
he's
I kind of know all my people's background.
Yeah, for sure.
Talk to him. But yeah, he was a great ad, and I was going to call him a diamond in the rough, but he's not a diamond in the rough. He's solid.
I'm happy.
I could talk about my whole entire team. I mean, they're so solid. I mean.
Well, listen, so you got there and you've been there for a bit, and
so I'm going to interrupt you. So the origin stories I think is the fun part, because Thomas is involved, and if he's listening to this, he'll probably like roll his eyes and be like, "Oh boy." So I'm reading the job description, VP of Operation. I'm like, I'm just leaving this job. I want to leave this job, VP of Engineering.
Because the one that they called you for is engineering, right?
Right.
And now you take on operations. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And so I'm reading the job description. And I'm like, man, this is like, if I had to write a blank sheet of paper and write a job description out perfect for Pete, I'm like, it was checking all the boxes. And I'm like, man, this is great. And until I get to the bottom, it says Navy new chief. And I'm like, I'm not a Navy new chief. Like it says job requirements, like engineering degree, blah, blah, blah. And it says like Navy new chief. And I'm like, man, I was code 2340. I don't know if that qualifies. So I completely out of character for me because I was really interested. I go to LinkedIn. I find Thomas McAndrew on LinkedIn. I said, like send the friend request, so to speak. And within an hour or two, I get the bloop, and Thomas accepted your friend request. And I'm like, oh. So I went straight to him, and I was like, hey, sorry to bother you. I see this VP of operations job, but I wasn't a chief. I didn't make, wasn't in the Navy, wasn't a chief, but. I did the commercial side and worked at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, code 2340, reactor testing and refuel. Does that qualify? And he goes, and the only response I get is, yes, look forward to speaking with you. And I'm like,
that sounds about right.
So I show it to my wife, and I go, and like I said, we're in Boston. I can show it to my wife, and she goes, that guy probably sends that message to everybody who reaches out to him, like, and I'm like, no, it feels real. It feels genuine. And like another week goes by, and I got nothing else. And it's now Christmas comes and goes. We're getting ready to get on a plane and fly back to Texas. And the HR reaches out and says, "Hey, can I set up an interview with you?" And I'm like, "See, I told you,
nailed it,
right?" and so to go through it quickly, so they signed me up for an interview. I come in on a Monday, early in January, right after the New Year, 2020, and I meet with the COO and the then president of Enchanted Rock Ops. So Enchanted Rock is like Enchanted Rock Management, it's the parent company, and then there's 2 other legal entities, Enchanted Rock Electric, which is all our EPC and construction, and then ERO LLC, Enchanted Rock Ops LLC, that I'm president of, is like the operating company. There's all the dispatch. We own all the microgrids after they're built and commissioned.
Gotcha.
So we do the commissioning too. But once they're COD, I own them for the rest of the LTSA off into the future, all the maintenance, PM, corrective work. So I meet with this guy, Norm, and COO Thais, and they're trying to talk me out of the job, Kirk. They're like, it's 24/7, 365. And I'm like, I tried to explain to them, like, that's me in a nutshell. Yeah. Like, I've been underway. I've been a watchstander, 24/7, 365. Like, that's how you make money. Like, I'm that guy. And I swear, I don't know what their experience was with anybody in the role previous. And I'm like, I sat there, and again, for me, way out of character, I sat across from Thais, and I went, "You're just going to have to hire me and find out."
I love that.
Because she kept saying, like, it's going to be 24/7, 365. Like, you don't understand. I'm like, I do understand.
Yeah.
Just hire me and find out. she looked me in the eye and she went, "Can you come in Friday to meet some other people for an interview?" I was like, "Okay, yes, I can."
So you stayed there all week?
So no, so I came back in that was a Monday. I came back in on Friday, met Corey and Ian, our chief strategy officer is Ian, and then the president of the parent company, Corey Amther, met them on Friday, interview with them. And then I actually drove to San Antonio on Sunday to meet Thomas for dinner, all in the same week. And it's like now it's Sunday, and I think the Texans were in the playoffs and they had just lost, and they gave me a little bit of like Thomas is going to be watching the Texans game and then he's going to meet you for dinner. I'm like, okay, because he was traveling for HEB or something like that, or we was traveling back and forth to California, and he was just going to be in San Antonio for the weekend. So they, hey, can you hustle out there and do that? I'm like, absolutely. And so I'm listening to the Texans, and I forget who they were playing against because I'm a Patriots fan, of course, and they lost, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know how big a Houston Texans fan he is, and now they lost, and I got to meet this guy and make an impression. And so anyways, sat with him, had dinner, and it was one of those, it was just interesting. We sit down at this little bougie place on the Riverwalk in San Antonio, and waitress comes by and he orders a beer, and I go, "Are you going to think less of me if I have a beer with you? This is an interview." And he goes, "I'll think less of you if you don't have a beer with me." And I was like, all right.
Sam Adams, right? Is that what you're drinking?
Yeah. It was probably like Bud Light. So we had a great conversation. He asked about my shipyard experience. He asked about Code 2340, picked my brain on a couple of things. What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on that? And just closed me there. He just said, "Team seems to like you. I don't know why." Kind of jabbed me a little bit. And he said, you probably get an offer. This was Sunday. He said, "You probably have an offer by Tuesday." And I was like, okay, you send me an offer. And again, for me, it wasn't the money or anything like that. I mean, he really set the hook. I love what they were doing. I love meeting the executive team. And it was just fascinating what they were doing and the mission criticality of what they were doing and how they were supporting it. And again, it was just this whole resiliency as a service and the powers on type of thing that was like, man, I can really get into that and get behind that. So I got the offer, put in my notice and kind of walked out the door. I called back and said, "Hey, I'm available if you need me." And they said, "You can start next Monday." So from first interview to first day was like a 2-week period, and I was there.
No kidding.
Yeah. And then 60 days later, so I hopped right into it with our network operations center, what was going on. Again, another opportunity to see what they do, lead by walking around, just go in the field. COVID was starting to pop out at that time and become a thing. And then I get this text message from Thomas, and he goes, "Hey, you got a minute?" And it's like, well, he's the CEO, founder of the company. He says, "Hey, you got a minute?" I'm like, of course. And I was actually driving in the car with Karen, and she's driving, and I'm in the passenger seat, and she goes, "What's that?" And I was like, "Hey, it's Thomas. He wants to talk to me." And she goes, "Oh." So I'm like, "Yeah, I'm free." And so he tells me this, "Hey, we hired Norm to really be our, growth leader when it comes to engineering a product pipeline and the next development of microgrids." And I really thrust him into the ops presidency of that group as kind of like a stopgap for a year and a half till we found the right person. So like effective tomorrow, like you're president of Enchanted Rock Operations LLC. I'm going to send an email out. I'm going to do all the paperwork. Like you're the guy. And I was like, okay. And if he was there, I would have looked in my eye. My response to him was, "You're going to probably have to edit this." I'm like, "Thomas, I'm not perfect. I'm going to fuck some shit up."
Yeah. That's how it works.
He was like, "Yeah, I bet on people for a living. I think you're a good bet.
Smart man.
And you're not moving me off center on this. So like effective tomorrow, we're going to do what I just said." I said, "Okay, thank you." I didn't say, "Hey, does this come with a raise or anything?" I was in and that was 60 days on the job, boom, promoted. And then we went straight into COVID lockdowns, and all my guys and girls in the field still working. The knock, ran 2 knocks.
They were essential.
They were essential. There's a lot of stuff you can do remotely. You can't maintain equipment remotely.
Yeah. I mean, like we were in the middle of deploying tons of data centers. We actually grew significantly during COVID as a byproduct of the pent-up demand that came as a byproduct of the disease itself, right? Or whatever you want to call it. So it was, there was times I had people on my team that were the only person on a plane flying it back and forth. Like Jesse Sargent would get on a plane and he's like, I was literally the only person on this American Airlines plane flying from Ohio to, it was the wild, wild west. And you were stepping up and putting on some spurs for a president at that time, because there's a big difference between a vice president and a president.
Oh yeah. And you say, like, yeah, I'm ready for this. And for me, what I realized about myself is, I don't have all the answers. The team has the answers.
But you have to work for someone like Thomas, who like, hey, I'm going to mess things up. And he had to be like, check. I mean, because we all do, right? At no point are you going to be able to rise to that level without making a few mistakes.
And I made him a promise. I made all the rest of my cohort at the executive level a promise, but specifically to him, I'm like, I'm never going to lie to you. You can ask me whatever question you want to about the fleet, what's going on. You're going to get the straight truth.
Sure.
If you want my opinion, you can ask for that afterwards, but I'm never going to lie to you.
Sure.
But don't ask questions you don't want to know the truth about either. It's kind of symbiotic. Like, if you're going to ask an ugly question, you're going to get an answer. But
a lot of people
be prepared for the truth.
But he's like, A&M produces some of the best officers I've seen, right? Hands down. And both those guys, being with the backgrounds that they have, are obviously they've gone through tremendous leadership training.
Oh, yes.
And at a certain point, they've been taught, like you now, to where if you cannot have an uncomfortable conversation with, either upstream or downstream in leadership, then you're going to continuously have an uncomfortable relationship upstream and downstream. And that erodes confidence and trust. And as a CEO, I'm sure that he's like, look, I don't have time to double check you, have your shit on lockdown. When you make a mistake, be honest, let me know, right? And that's all you can do. I mean, I have 4 business unit presidents, and each one of them, whatever their failures are, typically is some sort of a byproduct of my own failure for having not
100%.
My commander's intent wasn't clear.
I know you have to know that that's how I view myself in reverse 100%. With my team. Is like,
yeah. I mean,
it's a shortcoming on my part. Why didn't I ask the question? Why didn't I know about it? Why didn't I stay on top of it?
It's fixable. Super fixable. But that's where growth comes from, trauma and stress and failure and all those things. So I think that when you said that to him and he didn't even blink, I'm like, between A&M and what they do, I don't have any kids at A&M. No one in my family's been there, but I have worked with and alongside those people. And I think they produce some of the greatest leaders, right? And
they do.
I think the nuke program puts together some of the biggest, fattest brains. And there are great leaders in that as well, but there's a big difference between having a big fat brain and being a great leader. Now, if you could go to A&M and you have that brain, that's twice the horsepower. Plus, those guys are rocking around with MBAs and shit. They're a triple threat, right?
Yeah. And I think Thomas got his Harvard. MBA.
Yeah, there's no dummies, right? I don't know what else you can do from an educational perspective within the field that he's in that would advance or improve him in any way, right? He's got it all. But when you took on that role, did you mess anything up, and did he have to?
Oh yeah,
okay.
Every day.
But he was cool. You still in your corner?
Yeah,
obviously.
I told him the truth, but I found out very early on. We had a challenge somewhere in piece of gear somewhere, and the site was reliable and was stuck on gens or something, and the guy
was it during the big freeze, the Texas freeze?
No, right. I crushed that.
That's nothing.
That was like my Super Bowl week in my whole career. Anyways. I forget what it was. It was, excuse me. It was something that was like, you got to call him, right? Hey, he needs to know this. So I called him up and said, hey, we got a problem at such and such site, and here's the problem. And he goes, what are you going to do to fix it? Well, I didn't get that far yet. He was like, what? Call me back when you got a plan. And click, look, hello.
That's how it works.
Hello. And I kicked myself so hard because I knew that. You don't bring a problem without a solution. And I'm like, oh my God, I made a freshman mistake here.
Cool.
What did I do?
And don't do that twice.
No, and then man, I found the answer, and I found what the steps were, and I got a plan in place. And I called him back and said, hey, you got a second? And he goes, yeah. And of course, it's a Friday afternoon, Enchanted Rock Friday. I call it Enchanted Rock Friday. Someone's going to break on Friday.
How it works.
And you got to go fix it, resolve it. And I go, hey, here's where we're at. Here's what we're doing. Da, 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 da. And he goes, okay, sounds like you covered all the bases. Thanks. Click.
That's all you need, man. He's got a lot of other big
and that's
things
the relationship.
to worry about.
He asked me a question, or we run our gear hard. The power's always on is our kind of motto, but we run often and we run loaded.
So talk a little bit about that. So people that are listening, Enchanted, your brand is definitely emerging within our space, right? And what was once a business that some people were familiar with is much more prevalent now, right? I think a lot of people, did you see your guys' groundswell grow pretty rapidly in the last 18 months?
Yeah, we put, hundreds of megawatts in the last 18
For
months.
sure.
You're getting done. And so we do distributed energy, we do microgrid and resiliency as a service. So a lot of times.
Explain to people what that is.
So basically, we call it a dual purpose microgrid. So we put in generation behind the meter. We do a cutover with our ATS automatic transfer switch where all incoming utility power comes through our gear. We do a cutover. So when our construction team comes in, and all the design has been done, they'll find where the incoming utility is to whatever the location is. They'll bring in either temporary gens or they'll use our own gens that are already on
And these
site.
are natural gas gens.
Natural gas gens, rich burn natural gas gens. And so we'll de-energize the store at the pole or the location. And then we'll bring in our temporary generation that's already probably there. We'll wire that directly in, re-energize the location so that they don't have to have too much power interruption while we're doing the cutover. And the cutover is basically intercept either all the above, typically they're buried. So we'll intercept all the incoming utility feed, do all the excavation, cut in, intercept, cut in, drop our ATS down on top of it, wire it all into the 52M main breaker. So all the incoming feed comes through our gear. So instantly you take on that risk of they're de-energized with the still utility, even if the gens aren't there, like we get the phone call. By default, we're there, right? And I'm okay with that. And then the gens will come in, and our ATS typically has two main breakers in it. 52M is the main utility feed, and then a 52G, which is the generator feed. And with
how
us,
big are those plants typically? You're saying you're not matching the plant of the utility. You're just trying to.
But, they vary. We do a very modular recip. It's essentially a 450 kW ESP genset and about 400 grid synchronous. You get some line losses and transformation losses, but basically it's dual purpose from the aspect of that 52M, 52G is always closed in, the Gen C utility power right at the individual genset. And all the line sensing. So any utility
the gens are in standby the whole time, right?
Gens are in standby.
Right.
All the breakers closed in. We don't want to exercise breakers if we don't have to. These big, massive 4,000 amp.
But you like some static transfer switch to put it on cogen the minute that there's.
So basically, we take utility line sensing. We can tell any variation in the utility incoming feed. And then within 7 seconds, turn the gens on and start taking load from whatever the facility is. So maybe their lights flicker a little bit.
The gens are on, or 7 seconds you're phase matching and walking the load over from utility.
7 seconds phase load.
Okay.
Moving load over. That's
Cool.
the rich burn. So we have like diesel-like response. That's why it's rich burn. You don't find a lot of rich burn natural gas engines out there. We standardized on one, and it's like the Ford Model T. You can get it any color you want.
As long as it's black.
As long as it's black.
I love it.
As long as it's the same one.
Now, you guys are doing your own. Are you guys using like partners like the Volvo Penta or the Caterpillar this or the owning that? Or?
No, we partnered with the same engine manufacturer that we've been currently using.
Okay.
The 21.9 liter is a Doosan engine, HDI blocks, Hyundai Doosan.
What's the size? 450 kW?
It's we're trying to get a little bit more. We're doing some of our own development. But it's about 450 kW in ESP and about 400 grid sync, and we're trying to get it to about 450 grid sync.
Is there a limit to parallel? Like how big can you build those blocks?
How big do you want?
That's what I'm asking. Yeah, so as many blocks as you want to put together? Gotcha.
Yeah,
they run it like a ring bus then if I did that and I could tether
You can, yeah. And depending on how you want to do your distribution and which ones you want to set up and what MVSs you want to put in between them. But we're doing a pretty healthy size project right now.
Are these medium voltage gens?
No, they're low voltage gens, but we'll do a 5-gen string or a 7-gen string, just to keep with its own transformer at the end of each string, and then we'll daisy chain the transformers together. And certain configurations like keep the breaker size down, keep the amp rating down on the breakers, so you don't have to go these massive breakers, and you can step up the transformation of the voltage before you get off site.
Is the application? Was it commercial and industrial first that you guys were getting into? And then how did you get in? You started taking
I'd like
off.
to say mission critical from the start, because not everybody's going to make an investment on this. Like, hey, I can go without power for 45 minutes an hour.
Not if you're a distributor that has refrigerators and you have
Correct.
dairy or, I got it. So it was, those are mission critical.
Those are mission critical. And a lot of times in the past, those facilities only had a portion of their load backed up.
And that
most
was-
critical loads, whether it's the freezer, whether it's point of sale, and you're a grocery store, it's point of sale, but the clock is ticking on, say, like a grocery store. I mean, they have refrigeration on site, and they have a lot of product that within a certain amount of time, without refrigeration, you got to throw it out.
Yeah.
So like this, like an HEB is like $300 to $500K worth of stuff if they have de-energized for 4 hours.
So yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, there's a lot of it. I started with in the critical power side doing communication plants and a lot of hospitals, right? Hospitals that want to provide other services, and to do that, to be rated at a certain tier level as a hospital to open heart surgery, brain surgery, you need to make sure the lights don't go out in the middle of someone's brain, right? So I started with hospitals and communication platforms.
The red plugs.
Yeah. And then, I mean, once the data center industry took off, I haven't been in a hospital since really, but that was in, the genesis, like late, probably around 2000, stuff like that is when this was kind of being rebuilt. This industry was reinventing itself, and I just don't think it stopped, right? I mean, Thomas was on stage with Chris Crosby, the CEO of Compass at DCAC, and they were talking about like, what is the longest pole in the tent for these hyperscalers, or how about this? What's the largest pole in the tent for AI to be more prevalent for us to use as the consumer? And it just demands, I mean, I had Rob Coyle of the Open Compute Forum and Dean Nelson. There's a bunch of those big fat brains that were there talking about like every time that someone does a chat GBT question, it consumes 1 bottle of water to cool the amount of power that's required.
Wow.
And that is the equivalency of taking your phone, your iPhone, and charging it from 0 to 100% 60 times. So that's how much power a question demands, and that's how much water is necessary to reject that heat from that power distributed from that question, right?
Just a little bit.
So think about, when Thomas was talking about, I remember I asked Crosby flat out, because power is the most critical thing that's in our space right now, power and labor. And labor is really downstream of the stack of power, because you can't distribute power without labor anyway. You can't manufacture the widgets without humans, and you can't put the labor in the field to build power plants without humans, right? So you could still get a utility provider to be willing to allocate, parts of their grid for something that you're trying to do. But if you don't have the labor to do it, you're still hosed, right? And I remember, I'm like, I don't see the change. I remember asking Thomas about what he thought the impact would be on, small modular reactors in the future. I mean, that's a long way out probably, but
it's probably closer than we think, but it's
going to take a lot of education.
It's on the horizon.
Have you watched Nuclear Now? The Oliver Stone movie on the Apple?
I have not.
Dude, you got to watch that, because I think that would be, if it was a little bit, I'm not sitting here advocating for Oliver Stone. I mean, I've watched some of his movies. Some of them are very controversial, obviously. I watched the Putin ones, but he does do a good job of bifurcating the difference between nuclear power and nuclear weapons. And I think that that's what held up nuclear as being more easily adopted from us as the consumer.
But then you got to explain enrichment, and you got to leave naval reactors on the side, and blah, 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 blah.
Oh, no, it's messy. But I think if there are people that are genuinely dedicated to climate control, climate change, it's inevitable, right? You're not going to be able
Fukushima hurt that. I mean,
well, no one died at Fukushima.
I know, but I mean, when I was in the space on the commercial side, it was the nuclear renaissance. There were 30 combined operating licenses, Surrey 3 and 4, North Anna 3 and 4, Vogel 3 and 4. There was 30 new nuclear reactors being permitted for combined operating license. Fukushima happened, and it went down to Vogel 3 and 4.
But that's optical, right? That's
a fear factor.
That's a lack of education. That's an increase or an overdose of propaganda, right? So if you sit down and you try to fully understand, I think it doesn't matter where you fit on the political spectrum. AI is never going to explode at the rate that it will without without power.
Right.
And everything we do,
and everything's getting electrified anyways.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, we could do so much more. Think about how often we recharge a reactor. Every 20 years, like you were saying. So I don't think that we'll be able to get to some of the places that we want to get to without adopting that. But I think that natural gas engines will be the future for our industry as the new standard as we evolve. And then when SMRs come online, natural gas will still be the primary type of engine that we'll probably end up using. It's just we can't afford at the size in which we're going to scale as an industry. We can't afford to not have.
I think nuclear will get us most of the way there, but nuclear is good at a bunch of things, but peak shaving and certain things like that, probably not
I can't agree more.
so much,
Yep.
but that's where the recips come in. That's where other technologies come in you can be baseload that plant, the nuke side.
Sure.
And then all your up and down you can do with other types of energy sources.
What's a much
and stack them.
I agree, and I think Thomas was talking about the stack loading, that the step loading, right? That would come where the engines they absorb that hit against the reactor, right? So
and quickly
you would use them. I mean, it's not one or the other. You're going to have both, but you're going to use one as a layer to the other. It's almost like a thermal layer to the other. Right. So when you see the industry taking off, and Thomas talking about all these things, and you have guys like Crosby, who's one of the captains of our industry, and he's talking about the greatest limiting factors for our ability, not just to deliver capacity for cloud providers, but AI will rip off cloud's head, right? And when that happens, like, we don't have enough power for cloud. How are we going to get enough power for AI, right? So there's going to be people. It's typically driven by finance, right?
Right.
But you'll also have those finance people that are getting really smart. They're going to drag out all the Greenpeace people that were once like saying, "Hey, no nukes for everything," and now they're like, "Hey, we messed up. We want nuclear power. We just don't want nuclear weapons." And I think that everybody could resonate with that, right? That's information that resonates. I just think that it's not more widespread yet. And I think that
those same people didn't realize that in the 90s they were taking warheads and unenriching them to commercial levels and using old warheads during the Reagan timeframe to fuel nuclear reactors.
No, I bet you very few people are aware of that, right? So I think that the more that, like, the movie Nuclear Now with Oliver Stone, I felt was very educational and everyone should watch it. But I could see, because it's him and he's a very polarizing person, it's not going to be widespread as much, because most places won't even really give him a place to showcase that story. But for us that are in power and we understand what's coming, the tsunami that's coming from AI, you guys have to be bracing yourself. So what is your biggest concern with what you do, right? I mean, you're responsible for deploying large volumes of power with unlimited places where you have to park it, and then you have to service it as resiliency as a service, which means 24/7, 365, regardless where you're going. What does that, I mean, the application of technology is going to continue to evolve up over now. The need for labor will grow, but not necessarily change. You're going to be looking for more sophisticated labor forces. What does that mean for a person like you, who your success is predicated on the success of those that you hire? And if they fail in the field, I mean, you're the one that leads them, so it is your fault.
It is my fault,
right? So
I view it that way.
Yeah, dude, that's not an attack. That's a protection.
That's the reality of the situation.
100%. Take a number, man. I got the same. Yeah, some people want those responsibilities, but don't have the emotional range for it. There you go. You have to learn how to.
I have to be high energy almost.
You have to learn how to enjoy depravity, right? You have to know that your Fridays are going to get sacked. It's just. You're going to have problems. I was a UPS service engineer for the first few years when I got in this industry. I was called and I was delivering whenever I needed, and it could be inconvenient as you wanted. It could be my kid's birthday. It could be Super Bowl Sunday. I've done it all. You got to get on a plane today and go fix this in New York today. No, they're not waiting until tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've had all those, and you have to deal with that. That's a very volatile thing with a very power is the most complicated part. More complicated in my opinion than mechanical solutions. So I think that what you're doing is right now we are talking because you're trying your best to be one step ahead of the demand of labor.
Right. And
for some reason, I know that you guys, because of Thomas's background and from what you saw, but FA 43, what were you? What was the rating that you were?
2340, code 2340.
So let's think about it. If someone puts out something, they need a Navy nuke, and they hired you and you seem to be crushing it, you're an outlier, right? So there's other outliers that don't have maybe a nuke background. I mean, look, they give with one hand and take it with the other. I've met plenty of nukes too that were one step away from being on, Jerry Springer, right? So there's no silver bullet.
Yeah, there's no silver bullet. And now again, there's certain roles, like on the commissioning system integration team, Navy nuke is the perfect fit. I mean,
makes sense.
That's where we slotted Greg. Greg's running all of our system integration, building that team out. And it has a bunch of any military, non-Navy nuke, anything on there. But again, they share a lot of that they're mission focused. They have integrity. They're curious. They have a lot of that stuff. And you can find that outside the military, no doubt. I think the military, especially the Navy, does a really good job honing that and
Air Force Power Bros
enriching
do a good job too.
Yeah. And, but my group right now is about 100 strong, and 68%, 70% of them are former military.
That's awesome. Where all are you recruiting from?
Everywhere.
Okay, but you going to the bases? Or
I go to the bases. I go personally when I can. Been to Kitsap and Bremerton twice this year already.
Is the competition stiff?
The competition is extremely stiff. Oh my gosh. So I went out there to the spring one.
Sit closer to the mic, just in case I don't hear you.
Yeah. So sorry about that.
No. You don't want to. We want to hear you.
Yeah. So I went out to Bremerton the first time this year. I went out to Bremerton in the Kitsap Navy base. Idaho National Labs, Tesla, SpaceX, every 3-letter government agency, Border Patrol, FBI, everything. Boeing, the nuke manufacturer.
Westinghouse. They have security clearances and they got some brains.
And they got some brains. And they're readily available if they're transitioning out of the Navy. And maybe 10 sailors, 15 sailors. It was like a 75 hungry, angry dogs with full bones to gnaw on. They attacked anybody that walked in there. Like, we want you, come over here. It was intense.
Well, not only that, but we hosted a conference outside Naval Station San Diego, and we had like 350 or 400 sailors, soldier sailors, and airmen register. And I forget how many companies, but we had like Equinix and Vantage, and I forget all the operators. But it's not just that there were very few that showed up, but a lot of them were like, I'm out in a year and a half. So you have to recruit that far. Right now, we're building a database,
and that was more the missionary work of who's Enchanted Rock, and then that's why I want to continue to go to them, so we get our name out there. And they know us as much as we get to, know them. And forward thinking, I handed out a lot of business cards. And the one most recently was when you were having DCAC. And again, I missed out on DCAC, but I know, what a loser. I was at a Navy-based recruiting.
But I'll tell you, Thomas had 6 or 7 Navy nukes that we brought in. So we bring in a lot of activity. Look, Greg, I'm not taking any. We invited him. He was a friend of a friend's.
He called you and checked us out. I'll tell you. He shared that with me during the interview process.
He did. Well, look, man, a guy like it, Greg.
Thomas interviewed him when he was driving back from just doing the podcast with you.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I had no idea. But guys like Greg don't need any validation from people like us. But he just like, what's the G2? What's the situation? Who's Enchanted? And what are they all about, right? And it just turns out that I had just recently met you guys as well, right? We were at that event in Houston, and I sat, I think, right next to both of you. I sat between you and Thomas, didn't I? Yeah. So I had a little bit of both sides that I was able to kind of scratch the paint with, and we learned a lot. I felt I learned a lot about you guys a little bit more right there. I felt like, I'll tell you what I felt. When I left, after you explaining to me your approach to operations and delivery of programs and stuff and teams, and I heard Thomas, from the visionary side talk. I don't know which one of you guys I said this to, but I'm like, you guys are like one of the best kept secrets in this space. Like you should be on a bigger platform talking about these things, because I could tell you from half of my clients are enterprise end users or hyperscalers and baby scalers, and then the other half are the operators. And if I'm not handling the operators, then half the time I'm working on behalf of the enterprise end user that's doing a fit out within the operator space. And at the time, the number one challenge we saw was the entitlement program to get air permits on gens, and and natural gas seemed to roll out with the ability to deliver product faster, and not just the product itself faster, but going through the permitting phases seemed to. I'm not sure if it was a great advantage, but it seemed to be an advantage. And speed is what the market demands right now. Speed and volume is what the industry wants.
I need it now. Do you have it?
Yeah, they don't care about your flux capacitor.
You get an order.
You have to
deliver.
Yeah, that's it. Transparency and predictability and the ability to deliver a product is the only thing they want. Talking to you, it makes sense. I think anybody listening to this is gonna be like, look, if I need power, I believe that this guy is the one that won't let me fail. That's what they want to hear, right? Not that you're not going to fail, your teams are going to fail. It's inevitable, but like
I'm going to keep them informed. They're going to know what's going on
and
every step of the way.
Transparent, and I think that where you're at, and I was telling Thomas this because every year, I think like next year I think there are 5 groups already that have asked to be the title for next year. And not that it's who we want it to be, what the industry needs. It's not like, hey, this is my best friend, but power seems to be the most important part at that time.
Yeah, I mean, well, while I didn't get to go to DCAC, and I swear I'll be there next year.
Attaboy.
I did go to the Technology on Tap. That guy from Todd from Transwestern had set up that.
Oh yeah, I was in Houston.
And
I think Anthony was
there. He was sitting right over my shoulder, and I'm like, "What's up, dude?"
Was he blowing
and he's
in your
like,
ear?
"Oh, I didn't know it was you."
Was he handsy?
Yeah,
he gets handsy.
He touched me a little bit.
All right.
But they had somebody from Neutrality. They had 4 or 5 people in the panel that Todd put together, and to a person, they all talked about power.
Power's it. That's where it's at.
It was only an hour kind of session. I hope to do it again a couple more times. And even some questions from the audience are like, have you thought about microgrids? What is your power? I mean, it's
the future.
It's
prevalent. It's been
it's all on their radar. They're all talking about it. How do I refurb this building and turn it into a data center? What are the power constraints? What are the needs? Digital Realty spoke about their campuses that they're building and the need for power. I mean, I believe that was the topic at DCAC, no doubt. But to hear it on a spinoff of that with this Technology on Tap, just looking at the Texas data center market, and to have some big sticks in the industry there talking about their business, and they all came back to power.
Power
wasn't the only thing it talked about, but man, it was
lands too, right? So
very power centric, permitting, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that the more pressure that your clients put on you, the faster. I mean, they're the ones that are driving the demand for power, not us, right? We're just solving for that problem. And right now, it is the Wild West in this industry still. Like, you have a first mover's advantage on a few things, it sounds like a little bit right now. And if you continue that momentum, like your group will have established a much wider probably market share, I'd imagine, over the next several quarters, just because you have the ability to message what you're doing maybe a little bit more efficiently than some of the others. And I think that there's a lot of likable factors. Like when Thomas did his podcast, I had a lot of people like, that dude's wicked smart, right? And then who knows, people are going to come out of this one and be like, this is the type of person I'd want to have on my program type of thing. Like, it matters.
I am not wicked smart.
Shit.
I'm not going to be outworked by anybody.
That's how you become intelligent. You don't have to be born with it. You just have to, like I told my kids a long time ago, right? Because I was blessed with no talent. So I said, you don't have to be bigger or faster or stronger or meaner or taller or any of those things than anybody else. You just have to outwork everybody. And that's all that my team's based on, that same philosophy. Like I do have some really intelligent people on my team, but I also have people that are just willing to outwork everybody else. And with that, like, they'll read it 5 times. They're going to learn it because I'll read it 5 times, where some people are really smart, like the Gregs of the world and stuff like that, or Thomases, are gonna be like,
big brains.
They're gonna read it and scan it, and then they're gonna buffer it like this, and they're gonna in real time. And then the Rain Man in them, I know, they're processing. You can see their eyes fluff. There's people that are like that. Bless them. I'm not that, but I'm the guy that if you give me enough time, I'll read it enough time and I'll figure it out, right? So,
and then I know Cole.
But there's more people that are like us than are like the others. We're the common when it comes to that. I think the world's ran by C students, they say, but the majority of us were C students. Maybe that's why. I don't know. I don't know if it means that there's an advantage, but so what is it that you look for? Is it really like, if people are listening right now and they're like, man, I like this guy. I'm great with my hands. I'm an outlier too, but I'm not a Navy nuke. Maybe I wasn't even in the military.
Right.
But I worked in my uncle's shop, or there's some sort of, everybody's got their own narrative, their own story, or quite frankly, maybe they're just hungrier than anybody else. They just need that opportunity. What would you look for, and how can you use this platform, this podcast, which will reach the bases that you don't have to travel to, but hopefully be flooded into those bases through our contacts and our friends that are Master Chiefs here, this and that there, and they're passing along to the fleet. How do you reach out to people and let them know, 1, how do they find you? And 2, what are you looking for?
So easy. You want to find me, go on to LinkedIn, you look at handsome devil named Pete DiSanto, and you're gonna find me. Nice. But no, I mean, I summarize it with I want integrity. I want somebody I want character and integrity, where somebody can look in the mirror and just tell the truth.
Do you have
and own it? And no, it's. I mean, you can do.
What's the minimum criterion that they have to be at? Like, what if they just went to college and they're an engineer, like your son? Would he qualify? Like, I could tell you I wouldn't qualify for your team, right? So
no, I mean, there's plenty of roles when it comes to operations, whether it's quoting the work, managing our CMMS system, doing dispatch in our network operations center. There's a role for anybody, but it's can you stay on mission? Can you ask the right questions? Can you be vulnerable and say, I don't know? I'd rather you say, I don't know, and I need some help.
Versus,
and be comfortable with that versus I got that, go way out over your ski tips, hurt yourself, hurt the system, hurt the customer, let somebody down. I would much rather you go, I'm not called to do this, or I don't know what I'm doing, or this is something I haven't seen. I need some help. Just don't go out there and gunsling with our brand, with our customers. And not everybody can do that. Like, oh, I got to impress you and let you, and then to show you the reason why you hired me. I'll train you on all that stuff. I mean, our gen sets are so modular. It's easy to, as long as you don't even have to have a big brain. You got a brain and a heartbeat, but you got that attitude and that resiliency. And I want to learn. And
you can't teach that.
You can't teach that. Like that's, you can't teach that level of character.
I think that we all try to hire for character and then teach, the talent part that you have to do. I found that
hunger and desire to say, hey, I want to go do it. It's work, and it's very rewarding from the aspect of almost everybody's on an individual development program. I want to accelerate everybody. I want to pay them as much as they're willing to put the time and effort into. I mean,
that's awesome.
And develop them and challenge them to be a leader.
Are you starting to maybe aggregate candidates a year and a half out?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Because I think that there will be there's probably a lot more of them that are, the further back you could catch them, probably the easier it is to convince and convert them, right? Because I mean, look at a guy like Greg. He spent several months scratching the paint trying to figure out,
he was
whatever industry he wanted to be in too. It seemed like.
I knew he was a keeper one from his service, and I think he's got like 2 master's degrees, and one is in like divinity studies or something like that. I mean, he's super smart. And again,
no one likes those people.
A&M grad too.
No one likes those ones either.
Super smart. And
I'm joking. You're a UT guy. You have to hate the A&M guys.
I pay for UT education. I didn't go to UT, but I'm part of the UT family now.
There you go. You're in the club.
And but the one thing with Greg is and he'll probably blush a little bit if I say that, but I'm sure he's blushed once in his life before. But so his resume came in, somebody passed it along, and I said, a recruiter said, hey, this came in from Ken Cohen or somebody on the sales team, and I think there was a Navy SEAL Foundation thing. And anyways, the resume came into us, and instantly came to my desk, and I 7, 8 o'clock at night, I'm doing homework, doing my work. My wife says, hey, you talking to your girlfriend on the phone? I'm like, let's work. And so I see this resume, and I go, I want to talk to this guy. So I had a recruiter tee it up, and I get on a phone call with Greg, and I said, Greg, nice to meet you. Thank you for your service. I said, what do you want to do? Like, it was all centered on him. I wasn't trying to sell him on something. I'm like, you can be on the sales team. You could be on a project management team. You could be in the NOC. You get an electrical engineering degree. We do power. Like, I know your background.
What do you want to do?
What do you want to do? Like, I could slot you in so many different positions. What do you want to do? And we had a good 45-minute conversation. He said, I really want to lead. And he talked about do you want to design the next system? Do you want to do permitting? Like, there's so many different things you can do within this company. And he was like, man, I got to think about that. And I said, well, instantly, I said, next step, I'm going to give, Thomas is driving back from Austin, I'm going to see if I can get 30 minutes, get you in front of Thomas. And I already sent him your resume, and he said, wow, we should talk to this guy. So I said, I'm going to tee you up with Thomas, and, talk a little bit about the company and what we did. And he already done some research. And so I teed that up, and he talks to Thomas. And then meanwhile, he sends me a note on the side, and he goes, hey, in all transparency, I want 2 things. I was interviewing with Equinix and Samsung and some really stellar jobs, but and probably pay more than what you're doing. But the second thing he mentioned was, I'm trying to get them to want me. You guys obviously want me, and that's a completely different perspective.
Sure.
And he went straight to, make me an offer type of conversation. And I was already closed, but
perfect fit.
But for me, that was perfect to hear that of, and we did. It was the truth. We would love a guy like that. Who wouldn't? And and we just, you tell me what you want to do, because I want to put you in a position where you, self-driven, self-motivated, you want to make an impact and be part of the mission.
Who knows?
You kind of pick your path.
One day maybe we share his story about his transition, right? Because it's hard because you can do a lot from those people's perspective, especially that fraternity that he comes from, which is even, I mean, think about it. The higher you go on the stack, the greater the attrition, right? And the more, if you have, I don't know, let's say 40,000 sailors join the Navy every year, maybe only one of those become a submarine commander, right? So maybe not even that many, right? I mean, it's so lean. So I think that he comes from a completely different fraternity that brings a lot of value from the leadership side, probably. And
that's what he said. I mean, not to paraphrase him, he was like, "I want to lead."
Well, that's what those guys are the best
lead a
at.
team.
The military does do a lot to invest into your ability to learn how to be a strong leader, right? And I think that's the hardest part of the transition for the veteran is discovering what you want to do. And I'm like, just get in the game, play any part of the field, and then slide around.
And we do that now.
Yeah.
Greg's been on board, I think, 4 or 5 months now. And every so often, very subtly, he'd be like, "Hey, I think I might need a little coaching on what's our perspective on how we want to handle this and as a company or something." I'm like, "What do you want to do?" I go back to him and go, "What do you want to do? I'll make it happen."
There you go.
I mean, we're still a growth company. We're doing a lot of different things, but we can, I mean, within reason, you can modify some stuff. But if you guys got some good thoughts, like, I'm all over it.
What do you tell people you do right now?
Me?
Yeah.
I stay out of everybody's way.
Okay, but when you're at a backyard garage, hey, we're grilling out here, and this is my buddy Pete. Hey, Pete, what do you do? What do you say?
I grow leaders.
There you go. I say the same. When people ask what is Enchanted Rock, what do you tell them?
We keep the lights on.
Okay. And then, are you hiring now?
Always. Yes.
Like you have open positions right now. If someone could reach out to you because they heard this podcast.
Sure.
And they could reach out to you now and they can start applying for jobs? Absolutely. That's fantastic.
And depending on what the skill set in the background is, I mean, we'll make an investment in somebody even if we don't have the open role. Because with what we have slotted for the amount of growth we're having, I have postings out all the time, even if I don't need the role, because I constantly want to be looking.
Yeah. I think we're the same. I think the industry is.
I didn't have an open role when I came across Greg's role.
Oh, really?
Nope.
Perfect collection of a person then, because he seems to be more of a hybrid multi-purpose tool that you can use for multiple different places. Like you said, on the engineering side, the operations side, the leadership side, BD is one of those things where,
there was a little trick there. That's why I showed Thomas the resume too, because then I get the budget.
Oh, there you go. Nice. Way to sell it.
Can you edit that out?
For sure they can. Well, listen, it's time to maybe bring this one home because this has been a great podcast. But before I do that, like, what else do you want people to know about you that maybe I didn't ask that you have the ability to maybe lay out there?
First of all, I don't like talking about myself. So this was a huge stretch outside my comfort zone because most times you don't put microphones in front of operations people.
It's true, but
maybe
we need to.
We need to change that maybe. Yeah. No, it's been a journey for me, starting in Boston and doing all the stuff. I'm not afraid to stick my neck out there either for the team or for myself or for my family. And, I always look for the next challenge to fail at something new, whether it's starting a new shop out in California, hopefully not fail at that, but, I lean into stuff when it's difficult and it's challenged. That's what gets me going.
What are you doing to keep yourself, razor sharp at the tip of the spear, so to speak? Are you?
I drink a lot of coffee. I never shut down.
That helps.
I don't sleep much.
Chain
drives
smoke.
My wife crazy. I mean, she'll roll over and I'm like going through emails in the middle of the night because there's an alarm. Hey, I got to go. There was a dispatch. I'm going to go keep an eye on something. She's like, it's 2:00 in the morning. I'm like, this one's really close. And Thais in the beginning wasn't kidding. It's 24/7, 365. I mean, from Winter Storm Uri and sleeping in my office for a week while we had that event, I like it. It brings me all the way back to my role. What I do now feels like I'm underway all the time. And what's going on? I'm like the chief engineer on board a ship. What's going on? What's working? What's not working? How do we fix it? How do we get home? How do we get to port? When are we going to fix it? Hey, we screwed something up. What are we going to do to make it better? I mean, how do we prevent that from happening?
How come you don't go back to the Massachusetts Maritime Academy to recruit?
That's on the schedule.
Is it?
I was just at Cal Maritime.
Seems like they're producing some strong leaders. I mean, is that where you learn most of your leadership skills?
definitely started there for sure. I mean, you make a lot of mistakes and you do a lot of push-ups there when you make
for
a
sure.
mistake. But there was a lot of learn by doing. I mean, to be 18 and going through the Straits of Gibraltar, just like anybody else that joined the military and deployed or went out to sea, it was definitely, I mean, they tout themselves, most maritime schools tout themselves as a leadership academy. I mean, I easily could have went to UMass Boston or Boston College or Norwich and got an engineering degree. But I don't think I would have had as much fun, experience. I mean, there's a problem. Like, we run it like it's almost like a fireman. Like at the maritime schools and similar to the Navy. I mean, like there's a problem. Like you run into that. If the building's on fire, you run into the burning building. Most people are running away, going, "Get me away." It's like, I got a job to do. I got to go take care of that.
Yeah, that's whole other mindset.
And you just run right into it, and you go, "What do I know? What do you know? How do we fix it? What's the next? Who's got a good idea?" I mean, that crisis management. I mean, it's good to a point. You don't want to make everything a crisis.
Yeah, but understanding how to respond in a triage mode is critical.
Yeah.
So, all right, man. Well, listen, anything else about Enchanted Rock that you want to share? I mean, the company seems to be on a really, really healthy growth trajectory right now. Anything that you want to
buy a system and it comes with me.
There you go.
Me and my team that literally, I mean, we do so much for our customers. They don't even know. We don't want them to know. We just take care of business.
Man, I love that. I love that. And I love this time. I really appreciate you making the time to come sit down and share your story.
This is good. Yeah.
We'll have to do it again. I think that maybe next year, maybe after DCAC, maybe during DCAC, you come in and maybe you're the one talking about power on stage next year and the deployment of power and how many challenges your team has been able to overcome over the last year, because there's always going to be something. If it's not inclement weather, supply chain challenges, it's hard to track. It's really hard to understand. Like, you have a conflict between, Israel and the Palestinians. You have escalating tensions between us and China. You have Russia, Ukraine. You have an election year. There's, who knows, maybe another version of COVID. Who knows, right? But you have so many things. It's hard to understand how to anticipate what those impacts would be on what we're doing. But this time next year, we'll sit down and talk about it, maybe.
Sure.
Does that work for you?
It works for me.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, thanks for making the time. Thanks for sharing your story. And thanks for joining the revolution. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man.